All right. Welcome back, everybody. We are now into our Q&A phase of the podcast. So we have a couple of words from our sponsors. So I'm going to start off with a special announcement. Hey, Alabama heretics. Keith Giles will be speaking at the Proactive Love Conference in the Birmingham, Alabama area on Saturday, September the 15th to talk about how loving our enemies changes everything. Learn more and register today at proactiveloveal, that's AL for Alabama.com, proactiveloveal.com. All right. Even though we just finished having a pretty long conversation about the issues of deconstruction and the process and what it does to us as well as to other relationships and things like that. Obviously, if you have questions related to that, that is encouraged and welcome if we want to hear those. But even if you just have questions in general about faith or just
Mary Magdalene?
Or Mary Magdalene. I can't imagine that anybody would for any reason. But if you did, you're in the right place because we could probably talk about that. Anyway, so
let's keep it rolling.
Matthew, do you have a question for us?
Yes. So what I wondered is one other word for deconstruction that's used is by Peter Rollins, PyroTheology, as he calls it. And so I'm curious if, I know for me, Roland's work has been influential. I'm wondering if for any of you three, if Peter Roland's work has been influential in understanding deconstruction using different language and metaphors, and what you think of that.
Oh, yeah. PyroTheology. Peter Rollins. I feel like, well, first of all, I would encourage everybody to check that out because the idea is that, obviously the word pyro is fire and burn up and destroy kind of thing. But actually, somebody that who's influenced, I think, Peter Rollins has been a guy named John Philip Newell. You guys heard of a guy named John Philip Newell? Oh, no way. You got a book by John Philip Newell.
Oh my gosh, someone has.
Amazing. Okay. Wow. John Philip Newell, he's an interesting guy, but he talked about, he had a vision one time, I think, and this vision, this is funny, but the vision was of a big turd falling out of the sky and crashing into a cathedral and like destroying a church. And it was like, what does that mean? So I think he was asking the question, like, what does that mean? And God was basically saying, like, I'm destroying the idea of Christianity as you know it. Like literally, this is a holy thing. This is the work of God to destroy your concept of Christianity, the way it's been delivered to us, because it's so other. And this also reminds me of there's a preacher in France. I've spent some time in France. I have some friends there, and there is an evangelical preacher who is very charismatic and evangelical, but he had a near-death experience. He got really sick, and in his near-death experience, he had a vision of Jesus. And Jesus came to him and showed him this city. And in this city, there was all these cathedrals and people going to these churches, and everybody was worshiping and praising, very high energy praise and worship kind of thing. And Jesus was taking him down these streets and showing him the pictures of this. And he said, what is this? He said, this is what I would refer to as Babylon. And he said, this is where the people are. And he said, and he's like, and you too. And Jesus looked at this guy. This guy's name is Patrick Fontaine. He's a preacher in France, well known in France. And so Jesus basically told him and said, and you too are in Babylon. And he said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, you've had an idol. And for the last 20 years since your conversion, you've been worshiping an idol. He said, no, I haven't. He's like, because he had this really radical conversion process as a teenager from drug culture to like this devout Christian culture. And he's like, no, I've been serving you for 20 years, faithful in ministry. He said, no, you've actually been serving an idol. He's like, well, what idol? He said, well, the name you give it is Jesus, but it's an idol. It's not me. It's a caricature. And so I'm going to change in this generation, in one generation, I'm completely changing the comprehension and understanding of what you even think Jesus is and what you think Christianity is. And this was like a radical thing for him because he was like, he had been involved in like healing people and doing street conversion. All kinds of things, planting lots of churches, things that you would look at and go, oh, that's a very successful ministry. And he like literally came out of that and quit everything, walked away from all of it after this experience. And so PyroTheology, back to your question, is like, the essence of it is that, in order for you to get where you're going, that God has to burn up, basically destroy your entire conceptualization of what you think is real, because it so skews your understanding, or our understanding of the divine, of God. It's God. It's herself, himself, however you want to put that.
I haven't read much of Rollins. My wife listens to the Robcast, and I know he's on Rob Bell's podcast a lot. So Peter, thank you. He is on his game today.
I have.
So he talks from my bathroom when my wife gets ready in the morning. But and everything he says, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm tracking with him. But I personally haven't read much of him.
Yeah, I was going to say I haven't either. I think there's one book that he wrote that someone sent to me, and I started to read it and I enjoyed it, but it was just something at the time that didn't catch me, and I didn't get to finish it. So I'm aware of him. I apologize. Sounds like you really love him. Maybe I should go back and finish reading it. But no, I love what you said, Jamal. That was really good.
I will eventually read Rollins because I've heard a lot. I know
I've
he's
heard good
influenced
stuff.
Jeff Turner, right?
But Peter Rollins shares the story. I want to maybe this is a good, I think, picture of pyrotheology. He writes these parables. So Peter, am I right? I think he writes parables. Yeah. He has a whole book on parables. One parable, I just want to share it because I think it's profound. And I think what we're talking about pyrotheology is like the parable was, there was this preacher who discovered, obviously this is a parable, so it's a fictitious story that he made up to communicate a point. It's like Jesus did. Okay, so the parable is there's this preacher who has this superpower. And the superpower is when he prays for somebody, they lose their faith. So this preacher would pray for people, he would sincerely pray for them, and they'd become atheists. And so he's like, is it me? Every time I pray for somebody, they become an atheist. So he's like, I don't want to pray for them anymore. So one day he gave up on praying for people. So one day he's on a train and he's traveling somewhere and he's preparing for a sermon. He has his Bible out and he's writing sermon notes down. And across from him in the train is some business guy. He's in a suit. He's had a few drinks. He's a little bit intoxicated. And he's cussing. He's on the phone. He's cussing, kind of like Matt. Just cussing everybody out. And he's upset. He's upset with somebody he's talking to on the phone. And so the guy's looking at him oh my gosh, this guy's really unhinged. And he's yelling and screaming on the phone. Finally, the guy slams the phone down and he's ticked, and he takes a swig of his drink and he looks up and he sees this pastor across from him, reading the Bible and writing notes. And he's like, what are you, religious? And the guy's yeah. He's like, what are you, a pastor or something? He's like, yeah. He's like, so you're a Christian? He's like, I am. He's like, me too. He's like, I'll tell you what. He's like, it may not look like it, but I have an issue with my drinking. I have an issue also with anger, as you can see. He's like, and I would have come apart years ago if it wasn't for my faith. So I admire the good book. I'm in church every Wednesday, and I go to church every Sunday. And if it wasn't for my faith, I'd be done a long time ago. So I admire your work. The pastor's like, oh, wait. Okay. He's like, and he felt moved. He forgot about his superpower. So he's like, can I pray for you? The guy's like, okay. So he prays for them, and he's prays. And after he's done with his prayer, the pastor looks up and the guy is looking around. He goes, wait a minute. I just had this epiphany. What's that? He's like, I've been going to church faithfully, reading my Bible every week, faithfully for 20 years. And you know what? This shit don't work. Freaking, I got an anger issue. It hasn't been solved. I'm just hanging on. I'm convincing myself this stuff works with all the terminology. This don't work. I'm kidding myself. I'm done with this God stuff. Walks away. Pastor's like, no, it's not what I wanted. This is the same pattern. So the guy gets off the train. He doesn't see him. 10 years later, well, before that, this business guy who's got this issue and drinking issue, he goes home and he's like, man, since I don't believe in God anymore, I'm not going to go to church anymore. He's like, so I should probably find out why I am so angry. I got to get to the root of that. He's like, because I don't know what else to do. And he's like, and not only that, I'm really miserable in my job. So maybe I got to figure out, what am I really supposed to be doing in life? Because I hate my job. So I need to look into that. And so he's going down this road and he's like, and I need to figure out man, I think all my relationships are in shambles. Maybe I need to figure out what I need to do to learn how to love my family. And so he starts to get real with it. So 10 years later, he runs into the pastor again. The pastor's he doesn't recognize him. He's like, hey, you're that pastor on that train 10 years ago. He's like, that's right. He's like, you remember you prayed for me? He's like, that's right. He goes, thank you. You helped me find my true faith. And that's the idea, that this guy had to burn up his theology. He had to get rid of the show, the shadow, the illusion, so that he could actually get real with his own life and what he was dealing with. So that's, I think, a good definition of pyrotheology.
That's cool.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? This will be a very short podcast.
Yeah, a 9-minute podcast.
Hey guys.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, I would like to hear your opinions on if you can foresee tension with family members coming because you're in a process of deconstruction, and there are ways that it will come out, maybe speaking or writing or something, and you know it's gonna get ugly. How would you practically suggest prepping for that, or prepping other people maybe for that, the people who may, family members who will be offended or hurt, or they can't believe you now believe these things? Any practical advice for kind of stepping into that soon-to-be war zone?
Yeah. Wow.
Well, don't do what I did and speak from a place of anger. I was really angry at the church and had good questions, and rightfully so. I wouldn't look back and say I disagree with my thought process or the things I was working through. I would have, if I had to do it over, I would say I would sort of just go away for a while and work through that without being so vocal. I don't think anyone should rush into, and this is just from my experiences. I mean, you want to rush into things and start firing off questions, go for it, like knock yourself out. But it's not, I think you learn as you go to ask the better questions, to not just to prove like your intellectual superiority,
Yeah.
or the fact that these people don't know what they're talking about because they really haven't studied church theology or history or development of thought or anything. That's pointless. Like that just feeds your own ego. So always take a minute to what's the motivation behind your writing or your questioning, or you're asking these questions. Do you really want to have the dialogue? And are these people really ready for this dialogue?
Right.
And maybe you could ask questions in the nicest way. Maybe they're just not ready. And so you always be more cautious than I personally was. I mean, I just was like, fuck it. Let's ask some questions and just see what happens. And then that doesn't go so well, at least in my experiences. Some people I'm sure have had better experiences. Some people probably worse. Don't be too rushed to get those thoughts out there.
Yeah.
Not to be dishonest, because you also want, I mean, if you believe something's true, you want people to hear. I mean, if you really believe someone is enslaved to a fear-based religious system, you want to liberate people. You want to help people. Most of us are altruistic and want to help people. And if we look at our systems and say, this is detrimental to your psychology and your spirituality and your anthropology and the way you deal with other people, you want to help people. You got to kind of weigh whether those people would see it that way or,
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to, especially with family members, and that's what you're talking about, right? Like family members. Because I have like Matt, I have family members who are very painful that, that we had this beautiful relationship and now it's sort of severed over these things. And not from my direction. I'm not the one, right, who's severed the cord, but they've made a decision to sort of kind of pull back. And so that's very painful. And that wasn't something and I didn't really necessarily bring it up. I agree with what Matt is saying. I think in some ways, like if you're in a place now with your family where your beliefs have changed and theirs haven't, and now you're kind of afraid of, okay, Thanksgiving is coming up and I'm going to go home and what are we going to talk about? I would just say really consider whether or not you need to have that conversation. Like, is this something... is it just going to bring strife, Or could there be a positive outcome out of it? I don't know. I think there's no one answer for this, right? It's not like one across the board answer. Every individual situation is going to be different depending on you, depending on the person, and even depending on what the particular belief or idea is that you've shifted or changed that they haven't, So it's really tough. I think the verse that comes to mind is the one that says, is to live at peace with all men as far as it depends upon you. And, in other words, so do all you can to have peace. If it's something you just feel like you're living sort of this lie and you don't want to pretend anymore to your family that you're this, whatever, look at me, I'm a Calvinist, but you're really not. Or look at me, I believe in eternal suffering, but you really don't. Then there's just something inside of you that's just like, I have to be real. I can't fake it anymore. I've got to somehow express to them and I just don't believe that anymore. But that's really tough because what that's doing is testing the assumption that we've talked about already. Do they love me unconditionally? Do these people that I love so dearly, are they still going to love me as intensely when they find out I don't agree with them on something? Now, with my own parents, I've discovered that they've been really cool about it, which thank God. My parents have been really the best. Even when I know some of the things that I've talked with them about have challenged them. I've been shocked, even though some of the things they've embraced, oh, that makes sense. We've had some really good conversations. But again, unfortunately, you can't control those outcomes. The best you can do is, I think as long as you start from a place of your heart's desire, like Matt was saying, your heart's desire is, you don't want an argument. You're not trying to, start a fight. You're just wanting to express something that's a different point of view. And as much as you can make sure that comes from a place of sincere humility and love, that's the best you can do, and then whatever happens is on them, right? And then how you respond to that, which though it is very painful, like we've been saying, it can be a very painful process to experience that shifting, or the temperature in the room just changes because all of a sudden, oh, you think that way. Oh, you don't believe that anymore. And suddenly, they're not laughing at your jokes anymore. And, it's kind of sad. So it's a tough one, man. I don't think there's an easy answer to it. But
I think maybe asking the question, I think the best relationships are the one in which you're aware of what the other person needs. And then asking the question, what do they really need? Because sometimes people they need to tell you what they're concerned about. And if that's what they need to do, you should allow them to have, I think it's good to say, hey, you feel conflicted. You feel concerned for me and our journey. Maybe they just need to share that with you. And as you're confident in your journey, you can let them voice their concern to the degree that it's okay. I mean, you don't want to go beyond to an abusive situation, but asking the question, so for example, my dad, his heart, he means well, he thinks I've lost my way. I'm the, prodigal son, whatever you want to call it. And so sometimes when I talk to him, I know that he needs, as a dad, to share how he's concerned about me. And I know that he needs that. So I'll just let him vent. And I know when I hit my limit, when I feel like, okay, thank you. I've heard enough of that. So what I'll say is okay, Dad, thank you for sharing, and let's pick this back up later. And I know I've given him what he needed. Not every question is a question. Sometimes questions are really statements. So if somebody wants to question you about your belief, if you trust your inner guidance, if you believe it to be a statement, then let them make the statement. But if you feel like it's a legitimate question, then you can feel free to share and answer the question. But it's just trust yourself, trust your heart, and give them what they need. Yeah,
that's good. Can I just real quick say something? And then, you're next. This wasn't a family member, but it was a really good friend of mine that lives locally. And I love this guy to death. He's one of my closest friends. I love him. And I know he and I disagree on certain theological points. So I sent him, there's a YouTube clip of, I love it. It's Brian Zond and this other guy, and it's a debate. And it's called the Monster God Debate. If you haven't seen it, you should look it up. It's amazing. So I sent it to my friend, and he was like, I couldn't even watch it. It made me so upset. I got so angry, I couldn't watch it. So I was like, oh, that's disappointing. Well, a few months later, I sent him another YouTube clip, and it's Brad Jerzak doing the beautiful gospel in chairs. If you've ever seen that, that's also an amazing clip. And here's the funny thing. They're both saying the same thing. Right. But when he watched the Brad Jerzak beautiful gospel in chairs, he goes, "Oh, I cried through the whole thing. It was so beautiful, man. That touched me so much. Thank you. That's awesome." I was like, whoa, look at that. So in some ways, maybe it's even just finding the right way to introduce that information, right? So for my friend, it was definitely not the debate situation, but it was this beautiful presentation that just framed the same information in a way that he was able to receive it, right? And it's going to be sometimes really hard to know what it is for that person that's going to work or click, and what's going to just set them off. So anyway, there's just a real example of that.
I'm not going to have better questions when I'm back in my kitchen listening to you guys talking. But I do have this one question is, because for me personally, when we left our denomination and started on this journey, on this road, and we've been through so many. Mine started with Benjamin L. Quoir's book, Undiluted.
Oh, yes.
That's the one that just clicked to me. The light went on, and I was like, everything he's saying is exactly what I'm feeling. I thought I was the only one on this earth feeling like this. And I was afraid to share it with him because he's a third generation Seventh-day Adventist, or he was. And so that was really scary for me because I grew up in a home that was Catholic one moment, and there was Baptist another moment, and it was all this other religions, on and on. So I wasn't taught that there was just one way. So I had that going for me.
Good.
But now that I'm on this road, and it's been 3 years since my discovery, I'm so elated. Like, I want to share it with everybody. And I feel like it's like a new start. I feel like it's during Jesus' time or even after, and you're getting together in these small little groups, because there is no church to go to with all this that we've been that I've been discovering, and that we've been discovering together. And so for me, it's elation. And sometimes it feels like a dream. Like I'm going through this dream, and I sometimes have to ask myself, geez, am I really here? Did I really hear that? Did I really read that? Is that what it really is? So my question to you guys is, how do you guys feel since learning this new journey, or being on this new journey and learning these new things?
You mean now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now.
That's a great question.
I'll go first. Liberated. My first book I called All Set Free because that's how I felt and how I viewed how everyone's going to feel. And so I was raised in a very law-based, I don't want to say puritanical, but holiness code, do this, don't do that, mindset and interpretation of Christianity. And it was very enslaving. And so, for instance, I was always told gay people were sinful simply for being gay. And I knew the Bible verses for that. But in my heart, I felt like I had to say that because I felt like it wasn't true. I felt like a hypocrite for saying it, because I was sitting here saying, well, you two gay dudes can't do literally the same things and live the same life as I, as a heterosexual person, can do. You're just doing it with someone else. I can get married to a woman I'm attracted to, and you gay people, you're wrong. And I had to say that theologically was true, but in my heart was like, I think I'm full of shit. It was very difficult to wrestle with that and grapple with that. But once I saw the gospel and Christianity and the Bible and all these doctrines I was told were true might not be true, and working through that, I guess the reason why I gravitated towards those more theologically inclusive doctrines was because it felt liberating. It felt like actual good news. It wasn't, Jesus says his yoke is light. It's not burdensome. And I felt burdened. And so it just didn't line up. Theology didn't line up with direct experiences for me. But once it seemed to, it's like, oh, this is what I've directly experienced in life. If someone has given me unadulterated grace, or if I show someone unadulterated forgiveness, the minute I forgave my dad for being like a really shitty dad is the minute I felt liberated. It was like, oh, okay, this is freeing for me.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I remember, I use my dad as another example here. I remember my dad, like a lot of us, have come out of like repressive kind of religious ideas. So his idea was that the world is bad, people are bad, God is angry. So that kind of informs the way he views everything. So but a lot of good things were happening personally for our family. My dad's a lot of good things were happening, and he couldn't see it. A lot of blessings, good things. I was like, he couldn't see it. And I got so frustrated. My dad was very nervous. My dad's an anxious kind of man. So he was anxious, nervous, worried. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm going, wait a minute. He doesn't even see all the good things that are happening. And I was frustrated. And I started to get angry inside. And I remember just like venting to God. God, I'm so angry. This guy doesn't see anything. He doesn't appreciate anything. He's always frustrated, you know? And I felt like what I heard back was, look at yourself. You're frustrated because he's frustrated. You want him to have peace, and now you don't have peace. And I just was like, yeah, that's kind of, and I kind of chuckled. Like, that's kind of funny, actually. I'm angry with him for the very thing I don't have. So I had this vision. Literally, this picture came to me, and it was a pie. And in the pie, it was sliced up in eight slices. And the pie, I knew in the vision, represented peace. And what I saw was a spatula kind of come down and scoop out one piece of peace pie, and it was put on a plate and it was offered to my dad. And one piece of pie was put on a plate and offered to me. And I saw my dad going, no, I don't want it. I don't want it. And then I saw the hand take it away from my dad and say, give it to me. Said, if your dad won't eat his peace pie and he's all frustrated, why don't you eat it for him? You can have two pieces, not just one. You have yours and you have his, and have peace for him, because you're a priest. That's what priests do. They do things on behalf of other people. So why don't you? So I just was like, wait a minute, I can have peace for another person. So if he won't believe the things I believe, I can believe it on his behalf. And it gave me a lot of satisfaction and peace. And so I take that now and go, if somebody doesn't believe the way I do, and they're like all frustrated and they're not open, they don't want to hear it, the way it affects me is like, they don't need to believe it. I'll believe it for them. I can have peace for them. So I can look at a Calvinist or whatever you want to call it, and I can look at them and they're all, you know, how they do. And I can just be like, doesn't matter. It's fine. I love you. I'm totally fine. You can think I'm going to hell all you want. You can think you're depraved all you want. I know your inherent goodness. You can think you're inherently depraved. I know your inherent goodness. I feel it for you. I feel it for myself. You don't even have to believe like I do. Doesn't matter. So it's liberating. I no longer have an agenda. People don't have to believe the way I do, and I can still accept them and include them and love them. Like, it's no longer dependent upon what they believe, because I can believe it for them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think.
What's that? Yeah, totally. I love the term namaste, because it just means the God in me sees the God in you. And it doesn't depend on the other person. It's like, I can see the God in you. I can see, like, I challenge you to meet another human being that is not made in the image and likeness of God. So the most Bible-believing person that believes in the literal words of Genesis and how the creation event unfolded, you can go to that person and goes, you know, you can say, okay, according to your belief in Genesis, when it says that all human beings were created in the image and likeness of God, can you find a human being that does not bear the divine image? And if the answer is no, everybody bears that divine image, then the question is on you. Can you see that divine image? Not, do they need to change? The question is, can you see it? Because if I can see it, I'm better off.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't know about anyone else, but all I can think of right now is pie. Real quick, I agree with these guys. I think for me, the beautiful thing is I feel like I don't fear God anymore. I love him, and I realize how much he really loves me. And in fact, I've been like really geeking out lately on just meditating on all these amazing verses in Ephesians and Colossians and Philippians and Romans that just go on and on and on about this incredible love of God, right? That nothing will ever separate us from the love of God. And it's higher, wider, and longer and deeper than we can imagine. It's like, and it's just, that kind of stuff just blows my mind. And I feel like I have freedom now to really fully grasp that, you know what I mean? And to have permission to believe that there is a God who loves me just way more than I can ever imagine. That's why I don't fear God. I don't fear hell. I don't fear this judgment. I feel like God is love, and he loves me, and he loves everyone, and he wants us to grasp this incredible love. So I don't embrace this worm theology anymore. That like Jamal was saying, inherently I'm evil and I'm bad. And no, I feel like that God sees me completely and loves me through and through. And so I'm not a worm in his eyes. I'm his child. And so anyway, those are the kind of things that I feel like I've received now coming through that deconstruction process, and it's beautiful. It's awesome. So in other words, I guess it's worth all the crap you have to go through to come out the other side. You know what I mean? Although I don't want to say out the other side because I feel like I'm still deconstructing. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm constantly questioning and studying and looking and questioning and pushing.
Right.
And I kind of want that. Like I don't ever want to get to the place where I feel like in my beliefs that the cement is dry, right? And no, you can't question that. Don't push that. You know what I mean? I don't want to reach that. I always want to have it loose and open and embrace the mystery. So
right. And once you get to a place where you realize that even if you have good theology, your theology is never God.
Yeah.
You've never got there where you're like, okay. I think it's Bernard Ram who says that God forgives our sins God forgives our theology like he forgives our sins. Like,
wow, that's good.
It's my theology, as good as I think it is, right? It's not God,
Mm-hmm.
So there's always grace for that. How liberating. We don't have to get it right. It doesn't mean shut off our minds and be, an idiot and don't think about things and just buy hook, line, and sinker whatever someone's saying. Think about things. That's why I think Jesus tells us to love God with our mind. When he quotes Deuteronomy 6, he puts in that little love God with your mind thing. Like, we need to think about these things, but we need to not idolize what we think about God. How liberating, because God's going to forgive it anyway. We don't have to get God right because we can't. Can we? Is there any? Raise your hand if you have perfect theology. If you're raising your hand, you probably have a little bit of narcissism or arrogance because, and you might have great theology. You might have some good insights. That's true. I think a lot of us probably have good insights. All of us probably have something to contribute. But the minute we say, "Oh, I've got the corner marked on God," we don't need to. That's never the point.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, just for those listening, because I want people who listen to the podcast to hear what you said. So what you said was that he told you was our theology is our best guess.
Best guess.
Yeah, I like that.
That's good.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's a guess.
Yeah.
It could be an educated guess. Some more educated than others. And that's fine. But
what if it doesn't matter? Like for example, I love people. I have people in my life, but my love for them does not depend upon what they believe. It's just not.
Yeah.
No. At the end of the day, it's not dependent.
I think you do need to have decent beliefs to get to that place, though. So in a way, it does matter. If I believed that I'm white, so I'm blessed, if I have that view, like some people literally have that view that like races are superior to others. Like bad beliefs can really muck things up, obviously. So beliefs do matter in a way, but at the same time, they're not the end all be all of everything.
Yeah.
Hello. I didn't see it on there. I don't know if I missed it on like the chart thing, but I feel like it's part of the process of cynicism. Is that on there?
It's not on there, but that's okay. We can add that in anywhere you want to put it.
Okay. I was just gonna. I don't know why I assumed. I just assumed that you all have gone through the deconstruction process. Yes.
Still going.
Or you're in it.
Ways. Yeah.
So, I guess my question is kind of like twofold. Like, did you go through that part, the cynicism, being cynical? If and how did you get through it? And this is kind of a weird part of it, but it relates to me personally. So I was a worship leader for a while, and there's a lot of emotion attached to that part of ministry. And I'm an emotional person, and so going through this process, sort of without that, what's the word? Well, anchor, but like also like it's like a venting place.
Yep.
Or a connection place, outlet. There you go, outlet. It like I felt a lot of loss, because I didn't have that connection to God. Because my deconstruction process has very little to do with my relationship. For me personally, my relationship has never been in question. But the information, the doctrine, church, people at church, all those kinds of things have been, totally moved around in my brain and all that stuff. And so anyway, I'm trying to get to the point, which is that the whole cynical part of it, like, how do you deal with that part? Because I don't want to be cynical. I want to be at peace, and I want to be what?
Can you give an example of cynicism? Like when you feel cynical about something, can you like, what
so like when someone is sharing their faith, or when you go to a church service and you see people on their knees or in tears, and part of you is like, for me, like a lot of that stuff, I was like, well, that doesn't mean anything, because they believe in something doesn't mean the same thing to me anymore. But at the same time, I didn't stop believing in humanity and that people hurt and want forgiveness, or they want validation, or they want connection, or they want whatever it is that they're, searching for. So it's not that I doubted them or their authenticity, but I don't know, just the whole, I don't know. I feel like I'm not expressing myself right, but
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, totally.
I've been in this process for like a year, and I was out of church, and I miss worship so much. I miss worship music. And so I'm kind of like looking for that. Like, do any of you have that? Like, do you guys in your journeys, like, do you still listen to worship music? Do you wrestle with the words? Because that's my biggest thing now. Like, I listen to stuff and I'm like, whoa, like that cannot be in that song,
right?
Especially with what I believe. I'm like, this is terrible. This is so sad and so hopeless. And, and so now I'm getting back into church. My brother's a pastor, and the church that he's a part of is progressing. And it's been actually really interesting to hear some of their sermons. I was actually going to post some of their sermons on the Heretic Happy Hour page.
Go for it.
But I was like, I don't know if they're okay with it. I don't know if you're okay with it. Maybe I'll message it to you.
We'll let you know what we think.
It just depends on their statement of faith, what they believe.
It's such a taboo thing, I feel like. It's such a taboo thing. Like when you're in ministry for so long, you're just like, can we share? Can I share this? Can you share that? I don't know. Anyway, but so I'm getting back into church, and I'm getting back involved with ministry, worship specifically. And I'm like wrestling with song choices. I'm wrestling with how, so I don't even know if I asked a question.
No,
I think you did.
Let me address that real quick.
But help me.
I remember, here's the thing, cynicism is
We're taking the mic away from her now.
Okay, so
you can tell she's a worshiper. She was on that mic.
Yeah. I remember a phase where I was very cynical of preachers, very cynical of any religious experiences. So I remember a couple of years ago, a friend invited me. I was back in my hometown, where I'm from in Columbus, Ohio, and a friend invited me to a multi-faith worship service where they invited different churches from across the city to come together. It's about 5,000 people in this auditorium. It had a praise worship band on the stage. That was like a former life. I was a part of that years ago. So like, I remember being triggered, like walking in and going, look at this crap. I left this stuff, and I was really triggered. And they were singing songs. And they had this big screens, and the words were on the screen, and it was all about like, God, you're so good, you're holy, you're pure, you're worthy of all praise. These phrases, that we sing in like worship songs. And I felt cynicism. But then I was looking around at the people in the room, and there was like all these people, and I was looking, and they were looking up at the sky, and I'm like, what are they looking at? And I knew in my heart, but then I came to this realization of what cured cynicism for me is the belief that at the root of every behavior is a good intention, is a noble intention. And that actually is the most important part. So as soon as I realized that, I was able to see, look at these beautiful people. Look at these good people who are in sincerity trying to connect to something beyond themselves. And it like really made me appreciate their heart. And then those words, something mystical happened to me in that moment. So here I'm in this worship service where I was judging it a few minutes earlier. And now I'm going, there's a beautiful thing happening. All these people are directing their energy beyond themselves, which is beautiful. And then instantly people started coming to mind. So I started mouthing the words of these worship songs. And instead of like applying it to some distant figure in the sky somewhere, I started thinking of people, real people who I knew. And I started texting them the words of those songs. So instead of talking to some theoretical figure in the sky, you are good, you are worthy of all praise, you're worthy of devotion, I started texting that to real human beings. And by the way, those human beings, people will say, well, that's idolatry. How could it be? Because all human beings are literally the manifestation of the image and likeness of God. The whole point has always been about incarnation from day one, that we are literally incarnating the divine on this planet. So when we love other people, we are loving God. This is exactly what Jesus said. There's no difference. And so it restored to me like this sense of like, so cynicism is like, okay, maybe I just have a different place to like, so I worship now, but I just don't worship the sky. I want to worship where God lives. And where does God live? Within the essence of humanity.
Well, and that's something that's changed for me too.
Yeah.
Is that he's become something different in the sense that like he doesn't need it.
Right.
The adoration and all that stuff. I mean, if we give it, he receives it. I mean, I think, but I don't think he's like, I don't know. Worship services are so different to me now, especially when I'm up there now. And I'm just like, you're right. Like there is this, without even realizing it, just you saying it. I'm like, yes, I'm thinking about the people. Yeah. I even went on so far last Sunday to say like, this worship service is for you guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
I stopped closing my eyes in worship. And I knew that there had been a change in me because I started to see people and I would like direct the songs to people.
And we've been wired. Some of us have been wired so differently to close your eyes. Don't think about anybody else around you. This is for God. And it's like, but then when I discover who like him, it's like, he doesn't want that.
What does God look like?
Yeah. It's like.
Looks like you.
Yeah.
Thank you. But I think you were going to say something about worship music, right?
Yeah, I had a couple things. So I know what you're feeling because like, I love my mom and dad to death, but I've since left the whole traditional church model. I'm in part of a house church now with, like I said, very radically different. But anytime I go back to visit my parents, if I'm staying over the weekend, we go to their church. They love they go to this mega church in El Paso. They love it. So I go with them. And the same thing, I walk in and immediately I'm just like, and so what I started doing was like just praying, like, Lord, because if I don't do this, I'll just sit there and I'll just pick every little thing. You know what I mean? I'll just like critique. Oh, that's stupid. Oh, that's wrong. No, you're right. Sure. And the whole time I'm just getting, tense. So I just started saying, okay, God, you know what? God, give me your eyes. Let me see people the way you see people and help me to find you in this place. Like, I believe you're here. You're in this place. And so just show me you. Let me see you. And the beautiful thing was he did. And like, so I got a ton out of that. I came home very blessed, right? But only because I opened myself up to say, okay, God, show me you're here, you're you know what I mean? And show me what that looks like. But one thing in general that's helped me just specifically with just not being negative and stuff, and being, and venting and all that kind of stuff. I started, this has like become something that through our house church that we just sort of learned is that everyone is in process. And that, again, we said this already, but there's things I believe now I didn't believe 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And again, I hope that I'm going to continue those things are going to be soft and they're going to continue to grow and mature and change. And so because of that, it gives me grace, and we've learned to have grace for each other and for other people that we meet that, like I may completely disagree with everything that person just said or what they believe, but I've found a way to give them permission to be where they're at in that process, right? So we're all at different points in the curve. And maybe I'm over here, but you're over here, but maybe in other ways you're like way ahead of me, right? And it isn't about who's ahead of anybody else. That isn't the issue. It's just the recognition that everyone is in process, right? And then giving everyone permission to be in that place, and that's okay. And then if I could real quick, I just want to say something about worship music. We are going to do a whole podcast, by the way. It's on our list. We're going to do a whole thing on worship music. But I think worship music, what I started noticing with worship music and even with hymns is how much worm theology is in it. Even like our favorite, the best hymn ever, Amazing Grace, right? Saved a wretch like me. It's like we just keep reinforcing this, what a worm, what a wretch. Oh, even one of my favorite modern worship songs, Reckless Love, the first time I heard that, I wept. It was like, oh, beautiful. Oh. But then I started noticing, we were actually in line last time at Sidecar. We did the second live recording, the first time we ever did the second live recording. And we were standing in line at Sidecar to get donuts. And we were talking about that song, Reckless Love. And I think at first I was just saying like how much I love that song. And then Jamal said, yeah, but there's that one part. And it's like, yeah, there's that one part that bugs me. And the line is, I couldn't earn it. I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Now I love the last part. Still you give yourself away. Oh, God just gives himself away anyway. But it's like, why do we feel the need to stress, I couldn't earn it and I don't deserve it? My sons are here tonight. And I love them to death.
What are the names, by the way?
David and Dylan. I'm not sure where
David
Dylan is.
Dylan,
He was
okay.
here a minute ago. There he is. Dylan's back there.
That's so cool.
And I can't imagine ever saying to my sons, Dylan, David, I love you so much. I've loved you from the moment you were born. I would have died for you the instant I met you, but you don't deserve it. I want to make sure you know. I want you to make sure you know. You can't.
Can you imagine feeding your baby a bottle and going,
Yeah.
you don't deserve this bottle?
Now, can I just make one tiny change in that worship song that would change the whole thing? What if in the worship song, instead of saying that, what if it said, I don't need to earn it. I don't need to deserve it. Because that's true. My sons don't need to earn my love. They don't need to. It's different to say they don't need to than to say they couldn't. Right? What I'm saying is, oh, you lack something. You're so pathetic. You could never earn it. But see, again, we put that, you know what I mean? And nowhere in the Bible, a minute ago, I quoted, even mentioned these amazing verses, right? In Ephesians and Philippians and Colossians and Romans, where Paul just gushes about this incredible love of God, higher, wider, longer, deeper, more. It blows your mind. It transcends knowledge. It's so incredible. Nothing could ever separate us from the love of God. And at no point in any of those verses ever does Paul finish that thought by saying, and you don't deserve it, you filthy slime.
It's true.
Never.
It's true.
We do.
Yeah.
We pencil that in the corner. We put that in there, but God doesn't. Gosh, it kills me. Like that's one of my biggest pet peeves about worship music. That no matter how beautiful the song is, just talking about the amazing, the reckless love of God. Oh, but by the way, you slime ball, you don't deserve it, you pig. Like, why? That's my voice, right? That to me is the same as David in this beautiful psalm about this beautiful love of God. David drops in about dashing babies' heads against the rocks. That was David. That's not God, right? So unfortunately, we screw it up. We put our own little twist on it that screws it up.
I did worship for like 10 years and played every instrument. And so the way that I've gotten over my cynicism is to avoid worship music. It's always in 6/8
That's a good
timing.
idea.
I can't listen to songs in 6/8 timing anymore because I'm just like, oh, this sounds like a fucking worship song. And it just seems so like to me, the whole idea of worship music as like a genre of music sounds so absurd to me. I went to school for music, and it's like for one, I'm more worshipful hiking a mountain. Why do we talk about worship like now we got to play some C, G, E minor, like fucking
D,
bullshit
C,
all the
G,
same
E.
time? It's like,
You can play those.
and then there is the stuff, like you paid the debt for me and all this penal substitution
Right.
stuff. That's just like the minute I hear that, I'm just like, okay, I can still be worshipful. I can still, look at the people who have the good intention. Their heart is in the right place. But I personally can't be like, oh, I'm connected to God now. It's just like, I don't understand why playing a song in 6/8 timing makes me closer to God.
Yeah.
I listen to offensive music. For most people, would be offensive music. Like I listen to Logic. He's a rapper, and I find his lyrics are like way more closer to on point to what being a human is like, and I find more connection to. And he would say all these offensive things that my parents would just die over. And it's like, well, that to me is actually more accurate than this beautiful worship music I played for 10 years. And I would be like, do you want any vocals in your monitor? I'm like, fuck no. I'm good. I don't need vocals in the monitor because I can't, it's just that stuff that's just like, Jesus, you paid our debt. And I'm just thinking like, okay, so God was going to beat the shit out of Jesus until he decided not to. And I'm supposed to be like, thank you, God. Like, so that I avoid worship. I can't listen to it on the radio.
What if we
and when I say worship music, I mean, like you know what I mean? The genre of music. Like I find Bob Dylan much more worshipful, or Bob Marley, or Sam Cooke, Otis Redding. Like I find a connection to who I am as a human and how that relates to God, the divine, the universe, whatever, way more than I ever got out of Hillsong.
And the great thing about that stuff, that kind of music, is that you don't have to wait until Sunday morning at 9:00 and go to a certain place at a certain time and listen to certain music. And
because
now
there's
I can
not an
connect to God.
agenda. It's art for the sake. It's
connecting
art
to God
in a
anytime,
pure sense.
anywhere.
Not we got to create this thing, but we got to make sure that we've got it in this formula with this, and that's just how it seems. It just seems really formulaic.
I think people are. I think people tend to be emotionally repressed. So when people are emotionally repressed, the one time a week they get to express their emotion is on Sunday morning in high-powered praise bands, and it feels good to express your emotion. And I agree. It feels good. But I've always been struck by in the scriptures it talks about like the mountains worship and the trees worship. And I just think that's profound. It's like, how do mountains worship? Like literally, think about it. Like, what do mountains do to worship? Nothing. They just be. They just are. They just do what they do. They just are. The ocean worships by being what it is. So the question is, I just think maybe the understanding of worship needs to expand a little bit. I get it that it's the emotional expression. Human beings, though, worship. I believe that we worship when we are able to connect with our heart. And when we connect with our heart, we're able to express love. So when you love, because obviously what is God? The essence of God is love. God is love. So when human beings love and can express love, that is worship. So every time you express love to another being, you are worshiping. And I just think that there's a picture of that's happening in these worship services and where people are connecting with their hearts. It just so happens that that's the only time they can really do that. Like how often do people look and weep and say things and express their devotion? Like you would think that people experience that in dating relationships periodically for a season, and then they get away from that. But what if that was the way we were meant to live? Which we are like enamored and we're like expressing somebody's adoration all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's worship. And when we do that, we're worshiping. And I just don't think that has to be limited to a theoretical being in the sky. I think we can like express adoration to one another.
Be worshipful when you give to the homeless. I mean,
That's right.
If you see it like worship, you're going to see things a lot differently.
Well, yeah. And then actually, that's the funny thing that if you look at scripturally, the worship is not singing. It's like worship is
It
never
can be.
equated
It's
with
not-
singing,
It's not, it doesn't,
but it's usually like the way you live your life, right? It's more about who you are. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's like, it's orthopraxy. It's how I'm living my life. That's what honors God. That's what gives glory to God, right? Can I read something real quick? Because you were talking about worship music. And I've only found, it's very rare to find a worship song or just a song in general that you think just sort of nails it. And there's a song by David Crowder called Praise the Lord. I don't know what you think about David Crowder. You probably think, oh, he's a cheesy guy.
I love David Crowder.
But dude, the lyrics to this song blow me away. So the song, here's the lyrics. I used to shake you like an 8-ball. I used to shoot you like a gun. I used to hold you like a hammer, try to nail down everyone. I used to keep you in a steeple. I used to bind you in a book. I used to take you like prescription without knowing what I took. But now I just don't buy it anymore. No, I've tried and I've tried to know everything for sure, but I find I know less as I come to know you more. You're not who I thought you were. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
That's so good.
Now that is a worship song.
So
I
good.
love that.
So good.
So
speaking of
is One Love by Bob Marley, though.
That is too, yes. And yeah. And it's a wonderful world. It's another
Bruno
great
Mars
song.
has a lot of good worship songs too.
And Celine Dion, I bet, right?
Katy Perry. Totally.
Rage Against the Machine. I
Theologically.
love Testify, Sleep Now in the Fire, Guerrilla Radio. Awesome song.
Tupac.
Awesome. So I think we're wrapping it up here. Thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Please, if you're not in the Patreon page, check that out. I'm going to the Facebook group. We have a hotline. You should call the hotline or text us. Let us know what you think.
I've already announced that.
We really care about that. So thank you.